I inherited a vast stretch of farmland my family had owned for over a century. When I returned home, I expected quiet fields, oak trees, and the peace my mother loved. What I found instead was a whole town. Luxury homes, gated streets, even an HOA claiming authority over land I never sold. And the more I dug, the more impossible it became to believe. Someone had stolen my family's property, forged documents, and built an entire community on it. Every street, every lawn, every house, technically mine. But reclaiming it wouldn't just be about land. It would be about exposing lies, facing a ruthless HOA, and taking back what was stolen, piece by piece. I returned to Ashridge Valley with my mother's ashes in the passenger seat, driving slowly down the same road that used to be nothing but wildflowers, wheat, and dirt trails carved by passing tractors. But now nothing was familiar. Where our ancestral open fields once stretched endlessly, I found identical luxury cottages, manicured lawns, brick mailboxes stenciled with numbers, motion sensor gates, and a giant iron arch reading Maple Grove Residential Township, governed by Ashridge Elite HOA. It looked like a town, sounded like a town, but I never remembered it being one, because it wasn't. Ashridge Valley had been my family's private agricultural estate since 1889. It was never a subdivision, never public land, never zoned for residential use. My mother, the last registered holder of the land, died 6 months earlier, leaving everything to me. But what she didn't leave was an explanation of how an entire settlement had appeared on our property while she was bedridden in hospice care across the country. I thought the confusion was temporary. I believed once I presented ownership papers it would resolve. I assumed honesty still existed in rural land matters. How could an entire township legally exist on land that was never sold, leased, or transferred? The answer would destroy everything I thought I knew about my mother, our family history, and people who lived inside Maple Grove. I parked outside what used to be my family's wheat mill, now converted into HOA Administrative Hall and Enforcement Headquarters, a massive brick building with tinted windows and luxury SUVs parked outside. It gave energy of a corporate tax office disguised as a neighborhood center. My name was on land records, but I needed county confirmation. When I requested files, clerk politely handed me a digital catalog showing that my mother had willingly converted her private estate into a government-recognized autonomous residential township, later voted into HOA municipal authority. That sentence was impossible. I knew my mother didn't trust corporations, didn't trust developers, and despised HOA-style governance. So why was her name on the municipal charter approval? Why were there HOA bylaws signed under her identity 6 years ago? And more importantly, why did the document signatures look nothing like hers? The shock wasn't the signature alone, it was the notary stamp. A notary ID tied to someone arrested 2 years earlier for forgery in a different real estate case. A notary who went missing. If the foundation was forged, then Maple Grove Township did not legally exist. But uncovering that truth meant facing not only fraudulent developers, it meant facing every resident who believed they owned a home, a yard, a driveway, and a future built on my mother's land. As the sun set, sprinklers across the artificial lawns created a fog that made the houses look ghost-like. Something inside me shifted. Not anger, but a sense of duty. That land held my family's death, birth, harvest, starvation, survival, and legacy. A fraudulent township could not overwrite a century-old identity. However, I had no idea what fight I was about to step into, because Maple Grove didn't just steal land. They stole jurisdiction. They stole governance. They stole authority. And worst, they stole history. The deeper I dug, the darker the blueprint became. Maple Grove didn't operate like a normal HOA. It ran like an independent microgovernment disguised as suburban paradise. Homeowners didn't just pay dues. They paid tax-styled levies, permit charges, surveillance subscriptions, and mandatory infrastructure costs approved without state oversight. They issued resident IDs, internal fines, gated travel passes, and behavioral compliance penalties. Cameras hung from lampposts like vultures waiting for rule breakers. How could an unrecognized, illegally built township operate with powers stronger than a middle-aged county government? The answer lay inside an internal document called Municipal-Style Governance Framework under Private Deed Authority. They claimed that because the township land was once privately owned, it could establish private municipal practices if residents voted unanimously. But the flaw hid in the very foundation. None of them ever legally owned the land beneath their homes. They only owned structures, sold via a fraudulent developer claiming permanent license-like residency rights. Meaning, they built a country inside my property with rules written by those who never owned a single square foot of soil. Inside the HOA hall, framed photos lined the wall showing Maple Grove's leadership hierarchy. Not elected, appointed. The highest title wasn't HOA president. It was town director of civil enforcement and land compliance, a self-invented title awarded to a wealthy former corporate strategist named Henrik Malloran. He designed the township like a laboratory experiment on social behavior. Compliance rewarded, resistance punished, silence preferred. He sold the dream that homeowners weren't just buyers. They were citizens of a new model community that would one day become its own town on maps. But dreams built illegally are nightmares waiting to unfold. Henrik built influence by promising security, exclusivity, and future land value appreciation once formal recognition occurred. Residents closed their eyes to legality as long as status felt real. They didn't want truth. They wanted privilege. And privilege loves delusion. Meanwhile, I traced tax filings, charter applications, county correspondences, and internal HOA meeting recordings. None aligned with lawful jurisdiction. Every letter referenced pending approval that never happened. Maple Grove was a paper kingdom, a legal hologram, a mirrored illusion convincing residents they owned monarchy land, while standing on stolen dirt and borrowed time. If their authority was fake, then every fine, rule, and enforcement action was void, which meant someone profited massively from this illusion. And the profits didn't go to the residents. The profits didn't go to the county. The profits didn't go to public infrastructure. The money flowed into an offshore shell account linked to a dummy land licensing corporation, created 3 months after my mother entered hospice. This wasn't accidental development. It was opportunistic land seizure through identity exploitation. And as long as nobody challenged it, Maple Grove stayed untouchable. Until now. I pieced together the timeline like reconstructing a cold case investigation. My mother entered hospice 2 states away, weakened, vulnerable, disconnected from local life. 3 months later, development surveys began on the land. Not public surveys, secret contractual surveys masked as soil rehabilitation research. Then came forged power of attorney documents granting rights to sign land use agreements. The handwriting analysis confirmed no match to my mother's medical-era writing samples. Fraudsters counted on her inability to dispute documents while terminally ill and isolated. Who gained most from her silence? At first glance, Henrik appeared to be the mastermind. But his background showed financial collapse 3 years prior. He didn't have the capital to build a township. So whose money built Maple Grove? A private consortium titled Northfront Redevelopment Partners, a funding group specializing in distressed asset acquisition. Except the land was never distressed, only temporarily owner inaccessible. Meaning the investors did not buy, they squatted with paperwork. By the time I discovered the financial records, Maple Grove had taken loans using my family land as collateral, meaning if the township failed, the bank could claim the land, not the homeowners. Their homes were already one default away from mass displacement, and nobody knew. Then I unlocked the worst discovery. These loans were still unpaid. They were months from default. If the loan defaulted while the land legally belonged to me, who would the bank chase? Not the township, not the residents, not the HOA. Me, the lawful deed holder. They built a town not only on my land. They built debt in my name. This wasn't a suburban conflict. This was a financial entrapment mechanism designed to force me into either paying or relinquishing ownership. It was a hostile takeover disguised as community growth. But Maple Grove underestimated one thing. I was not my mother, fragile, isolated, immobile. I was awake, capable of strategic retaliation, and fueled by generational loyalty. The next step wasn't emotional revenge. It was legal annihilation. I hired 3 specialists, not ordinary attorneys, a forensic document examiner, a municipal zoning law strategist, a corporate liquidation expert. Together, we designed a plan rooted in one core principle. Never attack the residents, attack the authority structure. Because residents were manipulated victims. But the HOA elite were calculated perpetrators. If authority was built illegally, could I dismantle it legally without stepping foot inside courtrooms? Yes. Through strategic asset acquisition. Instead of suing them for land theft, we targeted access rights, infrastructure permits, and transportation easements, all fundamental to township functioning. Their roads were not county-owned. Their utilities used private routing lines. Their sewage disposal used outdated legacy channels beneath my deed. Meaning Maple Grove depended entirely on external approval for daily functioning. So I bought every single utility contract renewal route through shell companies and silent investment groups. Electricity supply relay access rights. Water flow channel agreements. Private road maintenance authorization. Telecommunications relay pole rights. Emergency vehicle easement permits. All without announcing my identity. Then I waited. When renewal notices arrived and Maple Grove leadership attempted to re-sign, they were declined with a single phrase. Authority signatures do not match lawful territorial ownership. Their shock turned to panic, not publicly, but internally. They held emergency meetings, issued warnings to residents, and prepared for renegotiation. But every path led back to the unavoidable wall. They never owned land, so they had no jurisdiction to sign infrastructure renewals. Without infrastructure, could Maple Grove survive even 1 month? The answer, no. But that was only phase 1. Phase 2 was land-based jurisdictional absorption, where I applied for restoration of original land registry status under my family trust. Once approved, Maple Grove would be retroactively considered trespassing infrastructure on private agricultural soil, illegal regardless of resident count. The county couldn't deny the application because the forged documents were now proven. Maple Grove was now legally classified as unauthorized settlement construction built upon non-transferred land. I did not fight them emotionally. I out-documented them. Once Maple Grove leadership realized they were cornered, they selected violence, not physical but administrative. They issued mass email campaigns claiming an external hostile actor was attempting to destroy their township. They portrayed themselves as victims, reinforcing the illusion that they represented a sovereign community. They attempted to gather resident-funded defense capital, demanding emergency dues tripling monthly payments. Panic swallowed the streets. Homeowners lost trust in silence, not leadership, because fear can blind logic faster than lies. Would residents revolt once truth surfaced, or defend false leaders until collapse? Meanwhile, infrastructure deterioration began. Water pressure dropped weekly. Internet signals cut intermittently. Streetlights flickered nightly. Road repairs halted. Residents blamed external sabotage, unaware I now owned the maintenance rights. Henrik responded by deploying internal security patrols, further simulating government-like control. Residents believed law existed simply because uniforms existed. Psychology better than legality once again. But I waited until the last infrastructure contract expired. Then an official notice circulated. Maple Grove Township is operating on expired infrastructure authority and must cease all enforcement activities pending resolution. That notice traveled like wildfire. Silence turned into arguments. Arguments turned into accusations. Accusations turned into divided factions. One side believed Maple Grove always felt suspicious. The other insisted it was a targeted conspiracy. Cracks formed in the illusion. Then I made my move. I purchased the state highway access road leading into Maple Grove, the only paved route large enough for vehicles, deliveries, emergency services, and waste management trucks. It became my private logistics road, meaning Maple Grove became landlocked. The HOA attempted to file emergency injunctions, but they were rejected instantly due to no legal standing. The media got curious. Headlines emerged. Private township built on allegedly stolen land facing infrastructure lockout. Now the entire state watched, and Henrik hated witnesses. When media entered the story, Maple Grove's illusion shattered. Reporters interviewed residents who suddenly admitted they never physically saw original land transfer proof, only marketing brochures and stage tours. Who would they blame once proof was undeniable, the fraudsters or the land heir? To expose without appearing malicious, I held a press briefing with full documentation. Original land deed lineage, forensic signature mismatch reports, notary fraud history, illegal zoning bypass record, infrastructure jurisdiction takeover timeline. I clarified 2 statements. I never intended to evict residents. All leadership responsible for fraud would face financial accountability, not innocent buyers. The public instantly divided into 3 emotional camps. Victims who felt misled and apologetic. Denialists convinced Maple Grove was rightful. Silent observers waiting to see who wins. But Henrik didn't attend the press event. He remained inside the HOA hall, drafting what he believed would be his escape route. A liability transfer document claiming he acted under community majority mandate, shifting responsibility to residents. A coward's final act. Instead, the state attorney general initiated fraudulent municipal operation charges against Henrik, the developer network, and notary accomplices. Warrants were issued. Bank accounts were frozen. The HOA government fell not by force, but by legal recognition withdrawal. Residents stormed the HOA hall, but Henrik had already fled using a private charter hours earlier. He left behind a community built on sand and papers, and vanished. Now the township had no leadership, no legal status, and no infrastructure rights, and yet hundreds still lived there. What would become of Maple Grove, demolition, restructuring, or rebirth? I held the power to erase it all, but I surprised everyone. The public expected demolition. The residents expected eviction. The state expected legal precedent. My ancestors expected restoration. But I chose transformation. Instead of erasing Maple Grove, I offered a 3-path redemption program exclusively to residents. Convert residency to legitimate leaseholds under my land trust. Offer buy-in partnership shares for sustainable co-ownership. Accept relocation assistance fully funded by seized fraud assets. Not punishment, correction, because the residents suffered delusion, not greed. Punishing them would replicate the cruelty of Henrik's leadership. Could a stolen town become a lawful community without losing identity? Over 70% of residents chose leaseholds, valuing stability. 20% opted for relocation, seeking emotional closure. 10% purchased partnership shares, becoming part of stewardship authority. I established Ashridge Land Heritage Trust, where only sustainable development, transparency, and legal harmony existed. Maple Grove was renamed Ashridge Renewal Community, no longer private kingdom, no longer paper city. Past erased, future rewritten. I scattered my mother's ashes over the restored field behind the old mill foundation, not to mourn, but to return her to the soil she spent her life protecting. The land breathed again, not ruled by greed, but guided by stewardship. Fruit trees were planted. Public heritage gardens were built. A memorial pavilion told the true story, not glorifying conflict, but teaching future generations. Ownership without integrity becomes tyranny. Authority without legitimacy becomes oppression. Community without truth becomes illusion. Who truly owns land, those who hold papers or those who honor legacy? The answer, neither. We do not own land. We borrow it from those who come after. As the sun lowered behind the fields, I realized revenge wasn't the victory. Restoration was. And Maple Grove, once built on fraud, now stood as a global case study proving you cannot build paradise on stolen ground. It eventually returns to its rightful roots. If you liked this video, like, share, subscribe, and press the bell icon so you don't miss future videos.